Have you ever wondered how an ancient trade network changed the course of history? The Silk Road wasn't just a road for goods, it was a stage for power struggles, cultural exchange, and conflicts that shaped entire civilizations. What exactly was traded that was so important? What battles were fought for control of this lifeline? And most importantly, how does the legacy of the Silk Road still influence our globalized world today? In this video, we'll dive deep into the secret history of the Silk Road. You'll learn how this road became the center of power struggles between cultures, what revolutionary goods were circulated on it, and why it was the scene of so many conflicts. Stay tuned to discover how the Silk Road still shapes the way we trade, communicate, and interact culturally today. Ready? Let's go. Imagine a road, not an ordinary road, but one that stretches for thousands of miles through deserts, mountains, and endless steppes. A road that was once the center of the world. This is the Silk Road, a network of trade routes that connected Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. But wait a minute, why is it even called the Silk Road? It's simple, because one of the most sought-after goods transported along it was luxurious silk from China, a closely guarded secret of that time. But this route was much more than just a trade route. It was a bridge between civilizations, an arena for power plays, and a source of countless secrets. The Silk Road stretched from the magnificent cities of China, like Xi'an, across the hot deserts of Central Asia, to the bustling markets of Europe, a huge network that emerged over 2,000 years ago. Merchants, adventurers, and scholars traveled it, exchanging not only goods but also ideas, religions, and technologies. But why secrets? Because the stories this road wrote often remained hidden. Many political intrigues, rivalries for its control, and unique cultural connections were neglected for a long time, or even intentionally kept secret. It's a story full of surprises, waiting to be revealed. And here comes the exciting part. The Silk Road wasn't just a place of exchange, it was an instrument of power. Whoever controlled these routes controlled the flow of wealth, knowledge, and influence. Kings, emperors, and conquerors knew this all too well. So stay tuned, because in this video, we'll uncover the secrets of this fascinating route and find out why the Silk Road shaped world history and how it still influences us today. The Silk Road, a place where dreams were carried in sacks and chests. But what goods were so special that they drove entire caravans for months through the most dangerous areas of the world? Let's take a look inside the treasure chest of the Silk Road. Let's start with what gave it its name, silk. This luxurious fabric was more valuable than gold. Why? Because its production was kept top secret. Only in China did people know how to spin the fine threads of the silkworm. Kings, emperors, and nobles in Rome and Byzantium couldn't get enough of silk. It was a status symbol, a sign of wealth and power. But silk was just the beginning. Spices from India and Southeast Asia like cinnamon, pepper, and cloves brought flavor and medicinal properties to the kitchens and pharmacies of Europe. Gemstones and jewels from Afghanistan and Persia sparkled in the crowns of rulers. Porcelain from China, the so-called white gold, was so sought after that even the richest merchants stood in line to acquire it. But the Silk Road didn't just transport luxury goods. Paper from China revolutionized the world. Thanks to this revolutionary material, knowledge and ideas spread faster than ever before. And then there were technologies, compass, gunpowder, weaving techniques. All these innovations traveled the Silk Road and shaped the world as we know it today. The economic importance of these goods? Immeasurable. Entire cities and kingdoms lived off the income from trade. But even more exciting is how these goods shaped cultures. Silk not only adorned the rich, it also influenced art and fashion. Spices changed eating habits and medical practices. And paper? Well, without paper, there would be no books, contracts, history, at least not as we know it. The goods of the Silk Road were more than just commodities. They were ambassadors between worlds. They carried not only wealth, but also ideas, religions, and innovations from one culture to another. Which powers wanted to control this flow of wealth, and at what price? The Silk Road, a place of trade, of culture, and of power struggles. Whoever controlled these vital routes had access not only to immeasurable riches, but also to the power to shape or destroy entire empires. But who fought for these treasures? And at what cost? Let's start in China, the eastern starting point of the Silk Road. The Chinese Empire recognized the value of these routes early on. The Han Dynasty invested enormous resources to secure its borders and protect the trade routes. They set up outposts and sent out caravans to curb the influence of nomadic tribes in the steppes. But that wasn't all. In the west, the Roman Empire expanded eastward. The Romans were dependent on silk, so much so that the senators tried to curb consumption to save the treasury. Between these two giants, however, lay a mosaic of empires and kingdoms, from Persia to Bactria, and everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Every inch of this route was fiercely contested. And then came the Mongols. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan shook the world when he created one of the largest empires in history. The Mongols controlled the entire length of the Silk Road, and for a short time brought stability, the so-called Pax Mongolica. But this stability came at a price. Trade monopolies controlled by the Mongols ensured that only a few profited from the enormous profits, while others remained in poverty. And conflicts, they were inevitable. Control of the Silk Road was often the trigger for wars, intrigues, and alliances. Persia and Rome, later Byzantium and the Islamic Caliphate, all wanted power over this golden path. Even within empires, fighting broke out, as rival factions fought over revenue from trade. Trade monopolies played a key role in this. Whoever controlled key cities like Samarkand, Kashgar, or Constantinople had the power to levy taxes and direct trade. But these monopolies often led to tensions, as traders and smaller empires were forced to pay high prices or use riskier routes. So the power struggles along the Silk Road were more than just a simple competition. They shaped the political and cultural map of the ancient world. But what did that mean for the people who depended on it? Stay tuned, because next we'll see how the Silk Road not only made wars possible, but also the greatest cultural connections in history. The Silk Road was way more than just a trade route. It was a bridge, not made of stone, but of ideas, stories, and beliefs that would change the world forever. It wasn't just goods being exchanged here, but cultures weaving together. But how exactly did that happen? Let's start with the spread of religions. The Silk Road was like a superhighway of faith. Buddhism, for example, traveled from India to China and then on to Japan and Korea. Traders and monks carried Buddha's teachings in the form of texts, statues, and wall paintings. Then came Islam, which flourished along the route and deeply shaped the region, from architecture to science. And Christianity? That also found its way east, carried by Nestorian missionaries who pushed the boundaries of their world. It was as if every religion found its place on the Silk Road and blended with other influences. But the Silk Road wasn't just a place for spiritual exchange. Art and science traveled just as far as the merchants. Have you ever heard of Persian miniature painting? This extraordinary art form was inspired by contact with Chinese calligraphy and Indian painting. Or medicine. Chinese herbalism met Greek healing methods and created a new understanding of health. And then, technology. Gunpowder from China revolutionized warfare in Europe. The compass, which later made great voyages of discovery possible, also began its journey on the Silk Road. Even the simple but ingenious mechanism of the water wheel migrated from west to east. You could say the Silk Road didn't just transport goods, but wove the threads of shared human experience. Every work of art, every invention, every idea that traveled this route is part of a giant cultural mosaic that we know today as world history. But how exactly did these connections change world politics and everyday life? And why are the cultural achievements of the Silk Road still so relevant today? The Silk Road, a path full of riches and opportunities. But was it really as romantic as it sounds? Not at all. Every kilometer was a challenge, and danger lurked everywhere. What did the travelers have to risk to bring their goods and dreams to their destination? Imagine you are part of a caravan. Ahead of you lies the Taklamakan Desert, one of the most dangerous regions in the world. Scorching heat during the day, freezing cold at night, nature was merciless. Many got lost in the endless sand dunes or died of thirst and exhaustion. And if the desert wasn't your end, then maybe the snowy passes of the Pamir Mountains were, where avalanches and snowstorms were deadly traps. But nature wasn't the only threat. Bandit gangs lurked in the most remote places. These groups weren't just after gold or silk. They ambushed entire caravans. Entire trade caravans were destroyed, their goods stolen, their traders kidnapped or killed. No one was safe, not even the largest caravans. And then there was the political instability. The Silk Road led through different kingdoms and empires, which didn't always coexist peacefully. Border conflicts, power struggles, and sudden changes in the political landscape made trade unpredictable. One ruler might offer you protection one day, only to surprise you the next with high tolls or imprisonment. So how did the traders protect themselves? They were creative. Caravans traveled in large groups, often with armed guards, to deter attackers. Trading cities like Samarkand and Bukhara served as safe havens, where traders stored their goods and recovered from the hardships. These cities were often surrounded by high walls, with trained guards and thriving markets that offered both protection and profit. The risks of traveling the Silk Road were enormous, but so were the rewards. Because without these brave traders who risked everything, the world would never have experienced the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures that shaped it so profoundly. But what secrets and treasures did these traders leave behind on their dangerous journeys? The Silk Road might be a thing of the past, but its legacy lives on, and not just in museums or history books. Its traces are deeply rooted in the modern world, more than you can imagine. The Silk Road laid the foundation for modern globalization. Because what was it? A vast network that connected cultures and continents long before the internet or airplanes. The exchange of goods and ideas between East and West fueled what we know today as global trade, and was the first step in the direction the world is now moving faster and faster. And this step, it wasn't just taken in the past. In recent years, the so-called New Silk Road, or Belt and Road Initiative, has come back into focus. With enormous investments and infrastructure projects, China has created a new network of trade routes stretching from Asia across Europe to Africa, a modern global Silk Road that could revolutionize the global economy. But while the economic aspect is making headlines, there is also a symbolic influence of the Silk Road on the modern world. Its history embodies the idea that connections between cultures, regions, and nations are more than just commercial transactions. They are the key to understanding, exchange, and peace. The Silk Road was a melting pot of cultures. Today, more than ever, we see how its idea, the exchange of knowledge, technology, art, and values, continues to shape the world. We can shop in a global marketplace today, share ideas in seconds, and connect with people all over the world, exactly what the Silk Road made possible in its golden age. But what does that mean for us today? How does the new Silk Road influence politics, the economy, and even our relationships with other nations? And how will the history of the Silk Road continue to change the world in the years to come? Stay tuned, because in the last part of the video, we'll take a look into the future and see how these historical paths still connect us today. And so our journey along the Silk Road ends, but its story remains alive and incredibly relevant. Because what we can learn from these ancient routes is more than just the history of a trade route. It's a lesson about what connects us as human beings. The Silk Road was much more than just a network for exchanging goods. It was a place where cultures met, where ideas and innovations found their way. It showed us that trade is not just limited to the exchange of goods, but also includes the exchange of values, knowledge, and visions, and that's what makes the Silk Road different from other routes. It was the first truly global connection, showing us how cooperation and exchange make the world bigger and richer. And that's the point. We can learn more about our world today from the history of the Silk Road than we often think. In a time when the world is increasingly interconnected, that same spirit of exchange shapes our economy, our cultures, and even our political relationships. Modern trade may be conducted through digital platforms and air freight, but the principles of the Silk Road, cooperation, understanding, and mutual benefit, are still important. Ultimately, it's not just about the value of the goods traded on the Silk Road, but what the Silk Road taught us about one thing: cultural exchange and the willingness to communicate across borders are the real treasure. We can rediscover the legacy of the Silk Road in today's globalized world, in every trade agreement, in every international collaboration, and in every cultural bridge that is built. The Silk Road may be a relic of history, but its lessons are more relevant than ever. It shows us that it takes more than just goods and technology to change the world. It takes the exchange of ideas, visions, and understanding. And that's exactly the challenge we face today. So how do we shape the world of tomorrow? With the same open-mindedness and courage that traders, explorers, and discoverers showed on the Silk Road. The legacy of this legendary trade route is also our legacy, and it's up to us to carry it forward. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And don't forget, the story of the Silk Road is far from over. It lives on in every connection we make today. Stay tuned, the future is much more exciting than you think.